My name is Clara Mitchell. I'm a 58-year-old African-American woman living in a quiet neighborhood in Savannah, Georgia. My skin carries the warmth of mocha, my hair soft gray curls tied in a bun, and my heart, though steady now, once broke into 1,000 pieces. I wear my faith like my Sunday pearls, subtle, enduring, a reminder of where I came from. It began on a quiet Sunday morning. The smell of coffee filled my kitchen as sunlight spilled across the old wooden table. I was going through my late husband's belongings, 3 years after his passing. You'd think grief fades with time, but some mornings it knocks at your door all over again. As I opened an old cedar box, I found something strange. A bundle of letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. My name wasn't on them. Instead, they were addressed to my darling Eleanor. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Eleanor, I whispered. My husband's name was James Mitchell, and we'd been married for 32 years. I stared at those letters, my hands trembling so hard I could barely untie the ribbon. Inside were words I wasn't ready to read, lines written in his unmistakable handwriting. Eleanor, I miss you every day. She doesn't know about us. She never will. The letters spanned years, from before our marriage up to the very last year of his life. My knees gave out, and I sat on the kitchen floor, clutching them like they were pieces of my heart torn apart. Who was this woman? How could he have carried such a secret for so long? I spent hours rereading every page, trying to find meaning, but all I found was silence. Later that evening, I called my daughter Vanessa, 32, a nurse living in Atlanta. I told her, "Sweetheart, I found something. Something about your father." Her voice softened. "Mom, are you okay? What did you find?" I couldn't answer. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered. "He wasn't the man I thought he was." That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his gentle smile, his laughter, his promises. The betrayal felt like a fresh wound. But grief has a strange way of revealing the truth in layers, and little did I know, those letters would unravel a story I'd never imagined, a story of love, betrayal, redemption, and forgiveness that would change not only how I saw my husband, but how I saw myself. As dawn broke, I folded the letters, placed them in my purse, and whispered to the empty house, "If there's truth in this, Lord, show it to me." And so began my journey to find Eleanor, the woman my husband wrote to for decades. The next morning, I couldn't stop saying her name, Eleanor, over and over in my mind like a curse I couldn't break. I went through the letters again, every word pressing deeper into my chest. Each one was dated, neatly written, almost ritualistic. My husband had hidden them in that cedar box tucked beneath old tax files and photos of our early years. The more I read, the more I realized these weren't casual letters. They spoke of promises, of regrets, of a love that refused to die. One line tore through me like a blade. "If things were different, Eleanor, I'd be with you, but I can't hurt her. She's been good to me." He meant me. Good to him. I laughed bitterly, the sound breaking into a sob. "Good to you? James, I gave you my life," I whispered into the quiet kitchen. By afternoon, I'd made a decision. If there was an Eleanor, she deserved to be known, not as some shadow in the past, but as the woman who shared my husband's heart. Maybe then I could understand why he carried this secret until his last breath. I took my old Buick and drove to the Savannah Public Library, a place I hadn't visited in years. The librarian, a kind young woman named Martha, looked up as I approached the counter. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I hope so," I replied softly, sliding one of the letters across the counter. "I'm looking for someone named Eleanor. I don't know her last name, but she was in Savannah, maybe 20 or 30 years ago. Martha looked surprised, but nodded, scanning the old postmark on the letter's corner. This address is on Magnolia Street. That area is mostly historic homes now. I drove there that same evening. The address led to a small, weathered white house with green shutters, surrounded by tall oaks and hanging moss. A brass plaque by the gate read, Eleanor Briggs. My heart stopped. The name was real. I stood at the gate for nearly 10 minutes, my fingers trembling on the latch. I wanted to knock, to demand answers, but fear rooted me in place. What if she was gone? What if she looked at me and saw only a fool who'd loved a man who never truly belonged to her? Just as I turned to leave, the front door opened. A woman stepped out. Eleanor Briggs, I assumed. She was about 64 years old, white, slender but graceful, with silver hair cut neatly at her shoulders and soft lines etched around her eyes. She wore a light blue blouse and jeans. Her posture calm, yet curious. "Can I help you?" she asked politely, her southern drawl gentle. I froze, clutching my purse. "My name is Clara Mitchell. I think you knew my husband, James Mitchell." Her expression changed in an instant. Shock, recognition, then something else. Guilt, maybe sorrow. She pressed her hand to her lips and whispered, "Oh my God." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air was thick, still, heavy with everything that had never been said. Finally, she nodded slowly and said, "You'd better come in." And as I stepped into her house, I felt the world tilt, past and present colliding, grief and betrayal tangled together like the moss that clung to Savannah's trees. Eleanor led me into a cozy living room, furnished with worn oak chairs and floral cushions. The scent of chamomile tea lingered in the air, comforting yet bittersweet. I noticed the walls were lined with photos, children playing, a wedding, a man with dark hair who could have been James in his younger years. She gestured to a chair opposite hers. "Sit, Clara. You've come a long way for answers." I sat, hands clasped tightly on my lap. The minutes stretched like hours, filled only with the ticking of an old wall clock. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. "I never wanted this life to collide with yours," she said softly. "James, he never intended to hurt anyone. Not you, not me. I loved him truly, but we made different choices." I shook my head, fighting tears. "Choices? Eleanor, my husband carried this secret for decades. I thought I knew him. I thought I trusted him." Her eyes softened. "I know. And I've suffered, Clara. Every day I knew he was with you, I loved him from afar, in silence. I never asked him to leave you. I never wanted to destroy what you had. I thought my love would be enough to let me watch from a distance." I closed my eyes, letting her words settle like rain on parched earth. A part of me wanted to scream, to shout at her, to demand why she hadn't come sooner, but another part, a quieter part, older, wiser, understood the weight of her restraint. "You were his safe place," she continued. "I was just a shadow. I only wrote letters because it was the only way to speak without shattering your life." I took a deep breath, my throat tight. "And the letters? Why leave them hidden? Why not tell me, Eleanor?" Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up one of the old letters from the table. "I wanted you to see him through your own memories, not through my presence. I wanted you to have peace. I wanted to honor your marriage, even if it meant living with regret myself." I stared at her, this stranger who had unknowingly shaped my husband's life alongside mine. For the first time, I saw not an enemy, but a woman who had loved in silence, just as I had endured betrayal. I don't hate you," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I hate what happened, but I can't hate you. Not really. You were part of his heart, even if you were hidden." She smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and sorrow. "And you, Clara, you gave him everything else. Love, care, forgiveness. I could never take that from you, even if I had wanted to." We sat in silence again, letting memories hang in the air, unspoken yet understood. Outside, the Savannah sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden streaks across the moss-laden streets. In that quiet moment, two women, bound by love and loss, finally began to see each other not as rivals, but as witnesses to a man they both cherished. "I suppose," Eleanor said softly, "there's only one thing left to ask." I looked at her, wary.
Do you forgive me? I exhaled slowly, tears finally slipping down my cheeks. I forgive you because you loved him as I did, even in silence, and because holding on to anger only prolongs the pain. Her lips quivered and she nodded, as though a weight had lifted. Thank you, Clara. I realized then that the road to peace wasn't about uncovering every secret or punishing those who hurt us. It was about acknowledging the humanity in everyone, even in the people who unknowingly caused the deepest wounds. And as I left Eleanor's house that evening, walking down the quiet Magnolia Street, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: release.
The next morning, I woke to a soft drizzle tapping against the windows of my Charleston apartment. Steam curled from my cup of coffee, but the warmth didn't quite reach the chill that lingered in my chest. Eleanor's words replayed in my mind. I only wrote letters because it was the only way to speak without shattering your life. I had spent decades believing betrayal defined James, and yet now I realized it had defined me more. My grief, my anger, my nights spent staring at the ceiling, all fueled by the unknown. But today, I felt a flicker of something new: understanding. I opened my journal and wrote, "Anger is heavy, forgiveness is light, but understanding is freedom." Later, as the rain softened, I stepped out for a walk. The streets glistened, reflecting the gray-blue sky above. I saw neighbors hurrying by, umbrellas bobbing, children splashing in puddles without care. Life moved on, indifferent to our private heartbreaks. I passed by Magnolia Park, where I used to take James when he was little. The swings creaked in the wind. Empty now. I closed my eyes, imagining him as a boy, laughing and running, innocence untouched by deceit. It reminded me that life was layered: loss, love, betrayal, hope, all intertwined, and none of it could be erased. Back at home, I found a package waiting on my porch. It was unmarked, but inside was a set of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. My hands shook as I untied them. Eleanor's handwriting flowed across the pages, revealing truths James never spoke aloud. Memories of love, fears, and regrets. One letter caught my breath. "If you are reading this, know that I never stopped caring for Clara. I wanted to protect her, and in doing so, I silenced the part of me that ached to speak. I hope she can forgive the shadows I cast." Tears streamed down my face. All those years, I had carried the weight of his silence, believing it was betrayal, but it was a complicated tapestry of human choices, of flawed love and quiet sacrifices. That evening, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. A woman with a gentle, measured tone introduced herself. "Miss Mitchell," she said, "I work with the Charleston Senior Center. They're looking for someone with your experience in advocacy and empathy. They've heard your story and would like you to help mentor women who have faced family betrayal." I felt a flutter of excitement. This was more than an opportunity. It was a chance to transform pain into purpose, to guide others through the labyrinth of loss and betrayal with the wisdom I had earned. I agreed immediately. That night, I lit a single candle on my kitchen table, watching its flame dance and flicker. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the streets shimmered under the street lights. For the first time in decades, I felt that the past shadows weren't crushing me, they were guiding me. I whispered softly to the night, "Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, James. And thank you, life, for teaching me that love can endure beyond mistakes, and peace is always waiting for those who seek it."
The next morning, sunlight spilled over the Charleston rooftops, chasing away the remnants of the storm. I brewed my coffee slowly, savoring the aroma, as if each sip could dissolve a fraction of the past's heaviness. The letters Eleanor had sent lay open on my table, their contents a quiet storm of regrets, confessions, and untold truths. I realized that James had been trapped between love and duty, silence and honesty. I had judged him harshly, but now, reading Eleanor's words, I could feel his struggle. The boy I once nurtured, now a man shaped by impossible choices. I felt a pull to act, to transform my reflection of pain into action. That morning, I reached out to the Charleston Senior Center, agreeing to mentor women who had experienced family betrayal, financial deception, and fractured trust. Each call I made, each email I sent, I felt lighter, as though every act of service erased a piece of old bitterness. The first day of mentoring arrived. I walked into the center's cozy room, the walls adorned with photographs of community events, laughter frozen in time. Women of all ages looked at me with anticipation and hesitation, faces worn by hardship, yet resilient in spirit. I greeted them with a soft, genuine smile. I know the weight of silence. I know the ache of betrayal, but I've learned something important. Pain does not define you. Your response does. One woman, a young mother named Mariah, hesitated, tears brimming in her eyes. I lost my husband to lies. He took our savings, left us with nothing. I don't know how to trust again. I placed a hand gently on hers. Mariah, you are still whole. Your heart may feel fractured, but it can heal. Trust grows slowly, but it can grow again. The choice to rise, to rebuild, that is yours. Over the next few weeks, I guided these women, helping them understand their own strength. Letters came in from women who could not speak their pain aloud. Stories of betrayal, of deception, of being silenced. Each story I read, each conversation I had, I felt the threads of my own past untangling. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the Charleston skyline, James called me. His voice was quiet, but steady. Mom, I've been reading some of the letters Eleanor sent. I didn't understand before. I think I'm starting to. I smiled softly. Understanding doesn't erase the past, but it changes the way we carry it. You've been learning too, in your own way. That's enough for now. That evening, I returned home and lit a candle in memory of the lessons learned, of the forgiveness earned, and of the peace slowly settling into my life. I watched the flame dance, reflecting on the fragility of life and the power of love that perseveres despite mistakes. The rain returned that night, tapping softly against the windows, but I no longer felt its chill. Instead, it felt like a cleansing, a reminder that even storms eventually give way to calm. I whispered softly to myself, pain can be endured, trust can be rebuilt, and love, true love, transcends betrayal.
A few days later, I visited the old cemetery on Magnolia Road, the same place where my grandmother used to bring me as a child, telling stories of ancestors who had survived storms, slavery, and sorrow, but never lost their faith. I hadn't been there in years, not since James left Charleston for college. The morning air was thick with humidity, and the scent of magnolia petals clung to the breeze. The sky hung low, gray, but gentle, the kind of sky that made you pause and breathe deeper. I brought a bouquet of white lilies and laid them gently beside my grandmother's gravestone. Grandma May, I whispered, you always said, secrets are like vines. They grow until they choke the light. I didn't listen then, but I understand now. My voice trembled, the weight of memory pressing down on every word. I carried pain so long it began to define me. I carried guilt that wasn't mine, but I'm learning to let go. I'm learning to forgive, even the ones who never said sorry. The sound of footsteps behind me startled me slightly. It was Lydia, my neighbor from 3 houses down, a soft-spoken woman in her early 50s with warm hazel eyes and hands always dusted with flour from her bakery. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said softly, clutching a small basket. I bring fresh bread here every Sunday. Thought you might like some. I smiled faintly. You always know when someone needs a bit of kindness. She sat beside me on the bench. We all carry something, Clara. I lost my husband in that car crash 15 years ago, remember? I used to come here angry at God, angry at fate. But over time, I realized grief only grows when you feed it. Her words hung in the air, settling deep inside me. We sat together in silence as the cypress trees swayed gently above us, their long shadows stretching across the graves. After a long pause, I reached into my purse and pulled out one of Eleanor's letters. I've been meaning to let these go, I said. She's gone now. Holding on to them won't change what happened. Nadia nodded slowly. Then burn them, Clara. Let the ashes fall where they need to. Some memories don't deserve to be prisons. I hesitated, but knew she was right. I tore a small piece from one of the letters, struck a match, and watched the flame catch.
its orange glow flickering against the pale stone of my grandmother's grave. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. And with each piece I burned, I felt lighter. I wasn't erasing the past. I was freeing myself from it. Lydia placed a hand on my shoulder. She said, quietly, "Sometimes forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you being ready to live again." We stayed until the sun began to set, the golden light filtering through the cypress trees, painting the world in shades of peace and closure. As I rose to leave, I looked at the ashes scattered beneath the tree and whispered, "Grandma May, I'm ready to stop surviving. I'm ready to start living." The wind stirred, carrying the ashes into the air like tiny gray birds. Free, at last. That night, when I returned home, I didn't cry. For the first time in years, I slept soundly, unburdened, knowing that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant reclaiming my own peace.
The peace I'd found at the cemetery lingered for several days, soft, steady, like the gentle hum of a lullaby. But life, I've learned, never lets you rest for too long. One quiet Thursday morning, as I was arranging flowers in my living room, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, yet something in my chest tightened before I even answered. "Mrs. Mitchell?" a deep voice said. "This is Detective Harris with the Savannah Police Department." My heart sunk. "Detective? Has something happened?" He hesitated for a second. "Ma'am, we've found something you might want to see. It concerns your late husband, Thomas Mitchell." The vase slipped slightly in my trembling hands. "My husband's been dead for nearly 20 years, Detective." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "But we recently recovered some records during an investigation into a storage facility fire. There were personal items linked to him, letters, photographs, and a journal." I swallowed hard. "A journal?" "Yes, ma'am. Would you be able to come down to Savannah? I think it might give you some answers." Answers. That word echoed in my mind like a haunting bell. I thought I'd made peace with the past, but suddenly the old wound started to throb again. By the time I reached Savannah 2 days later, the sky was a mix of orange and violet, the kind of sunset that always made Thomas stop the car and pull over just to watch it fade. The police station smelled faintly of coffee and rain when I stepped inside. Detective Harris, a tall, dark-skinned man in his early 40s with a calm but watchful demeanor, greeted me kindly. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, gesturing toward a box on the table. "These were recovered last week. We believe they were stored under a false name, possibly by someone connected to your husband's business years ago." I sat down, my hand shaking slightly as I opened the box. Inside were photographs of Thomas, smiling, confident, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. There were also old receipts, notes in his handwriting, and then, at the bottom, a leather-bound journal. "Do you want a moment alone?" Harris asked. I nodded, barely able to speak. When he left the room, I opened the journal and began to read. The first few pages were harmless. Memories of our early marriage, stories of James as a baby. But then the tone shifted. He wrote about Eleanor, my former friend, the woman who had comforted me after Thomas's death, the woman who, I realize now, had been much closer to him than I'd ever known. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. "Eleanor was right," one entry read. "Clara will never understand what I've done, but someday, maybe James will." My hands froze on the page. What I've done. Those 3 words turned my stomach. What had he done? The rest of the journal was fragmented, but it hinted at something far darker. Hidden accounts, deceit, and a man who had lived 2 lives, one with me and another steeped in secrets. When Harris returned, I was trembling. "Detective," I whispered, "was this part of a criminal case?" He frowned. "Possibly. We're still reviewing it, but there were mentions of offshore funds and property transactions under different names. It's strange, Mrs. Mitchell. Whoever stored these wanted them found. Now." I closed the journal,
clutching it tightly. Sometimes the dead don't stay buried until the truth does. He nodded solemnly. Would you like us to keep investigating? I looked at the photos again. The smiling man who'd shared my bed, my home, my life. Then I looked up at the detective. No, I'll handle the truth in my own way. I think it's time I finally knew who my husband really was. As I left the station, the air outside smelled of salt and coming rain. I held the journal close to my chest, my pulse steady, my mind racing. The past wasn't done with me. Not yet.
I barely slept that night. The hotel room in Savannah was quiet, but my mind was a storm. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me, and each rotation felt like another unanswered question. What had Thomas done? Why had Eleanor been part of it? And why now, after all these years, had these secrets come clawing back from the grave? By dawn, I couldn't stay still any longer. I sat at the small desk near the window, opened the journal again, and began reading more carefully. Between the pages, I found a folded note in Eleanor's handwriting, the same looping cursive I'd seen on her letters months ago. Tom, we did what we had to. She'll never forgive us if she finds out. But one day, maybe she'll understand. I pressed my palm against my heart, as if I could calm my racing heart. My fingers shook. The words, "We did what we had to," echoed through me like a warning. The entries that followed were dated months before Thomas's death. He wrote about a trust set aside for James, but it was tangled with guilt. He mentioned moving money offshore for protection, he wrote, and then something about Eleanor's name on the papers. A surge of nausea rose in me. God, what were you two doing? I whispered. I drove to the Savannah Library later that morning, determined to find any record of these accounts. My reflection in the library window startled me. The same face I'd seen for nearly 6 decades, but older, sharper now, marked by years of quiet endurance. Inside, the librarian, a kindly white-haired woman named Miss Doyle, helped me search public records. After a while, she looked up, frowning slightly. "Mrs. Mitchell, I think I found something. There's a property deed registered under E.L. Graves. Does that name mean anything?" I froze. Eleanor L. Graves. Yes, I said quietly, it does. The property was listed on the outskirts of Savannah, a small cottage near the marshlands. I felt an irresistible pull to see it with my own eyes. When I reached the address, the place looked abandoned. Weathered shutters, vines crawling up the porch railings, and a faded mailbox leaning to one side. But as I stepped closer, I saw fresh footprints in the mud. Someone had been here recently. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Dust motes floated in the sunlight that streamed through cracked blinds. The air smelled faintly of salt and age and something else, something familiar. Inside, I found remnants of 2 lives, an old leather jacket I recognized as Thomas's, and a photograph of him and Eleanor, together, smiling, standing before this very cottage. I sank into a chair, staring at the picture. "You betrayed me here," I whispered, "and yet you kept this place alive all these years. Why?" My eyes wandered to the mantel. There, among the dust, sat an envelope with my name scrawled across it. Clara. I hesitated, then opened it. "If you're reading this, it means the truth has finally found you. Thomas wanted to protect you from his mistakes, not from love. He made choices to shield your family, but I was part of them too. I loved him once, and I know that may break you to read, but you deserve to know he never stopped loving you. Forgive us if you can." The paper trembled in my hands. I stared out the cracked window, the marsh beyond swaying in the coastal wind. I wanted to hate them both, but I couldn't. The love, the betrayal, the guilt, it all tangled together, impossible to separate. As I left the cottage, I looked back one last time. The wind picked up, slamming the old door shut with a final echoing thud. Goodbye, Thomas, and goodbye, Eleanor. May God deal with both of your ghosts. When I returned to my car,
The sun had begun to break through the clouds, casting gold light over the marsh. Somehow I knew that this discovery was not the end. It was only the beginning of understanding what forgiveness truly meant.
I drove back to Charleston in silence, the marshlands fading behind me like the ghost of everything I'd believed in. The hum of the highway felt distant, and even the music on the radio sounded hollow. I kept the letter beside me on the passenger seat, weighted with truth that had rewritten my past. By the time I reached home, the sun had set, leaving behind a heavy purple dusk. My house, usually warm and welcoming, felt like a stranger's place. I set the envelope on the table and just stood there, staring at the framed family photos lining the wall. Thomas holding baby James, me in my nurse's uniform on our porch steps, the three of us smiling at a world that had no idea what hid beneath the surface. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the rooms barefoot, my heart full of ghosts. I opened the window in the study, letting the cool night air in. The moonlight touched the edges of the journal, still lying open on my desk, and something made me pick it up again. Halfway through, tucked between 2 pages, was another slip of paper, a copy of a bank statement listing a large transfer made 3 months before Thomas's death. The name on the receiving account chilled me. Eleanor L. Graves, trustee for James Mitchell. I whispered into the silence. So that's what you meant, Thomas. You weren't stealing, you were protecting. He had hidden the money under Eleanor's name to keep it safe for James, safe from creditors, safe from the business collapse he knew was coming. But to do so, he had crossed moral lines and hidden it even from me. The realization hit like a tidal wave of pain and strange relief. You lied, I said aloud, but you lied to save us. In that moment, something in me softened. The next morning, I invited James to visit. When he arrived, I showed him everything. The letters, the photos, the journal. He sat quietly for a long time, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. "Mom," he said finally, "I used to hate him for what happened, for leaving us broke, but now I don't even know how to feel." I reached over and took his hand. "You feel everything, son. The anger, the confusion, the love. Let it all come. That's how we heal." He looked up at me, his voice breaking slightly. "Did you ever forgive him?" I thought for a moment before answering. "Not completely, but I'm learning that forgiveness isn't a door, it's a path. And today, I took another step on it. After James left, I drove to the church near the harbor. The old wooden pews smelled of salt and candle wax. I knelt there in silence, the stained glass casting colored light across my hands. Lord, help me see the good that pain tried to hide. Help me forgive what I can't understand. And for the first time in years, I felt peace, not because the truth had set me free, but because I had chosen to stop being its prisoner. As I walked out of the church, the sea breeze carried the faint sound of children laughing nearby. Life, relentless and beautiful, moved on. I lifted my face to the evening sky, closed my eyes, and let the past drift away with the tide.
The morning after the storm, Auntie Rosie awoke to silence, a silence that wasn't peaceful but final. The villagers gathered outside her home, whispering about the miracle that had saved the valley. The flood had stopped right at her doorstep. Not 1 inch of her land was touched. Rosie stepped outside, barefoot on the wet earth. She looked at the horizon. The fields sparkled under the new sun. The tree of voices stood tall again, its golden leaves glimmering like divine light. But at its roots, she saw something, a small wooden flute, half buried in the soil. She picked it up gently, recognizing it immediately. "This was his," she whispered. It was the same flute young Krishna had once played when she was a little girl sitting under this very tree. She clutched it close to her heart, tears falling silently. That night, she sat by the fire, writing in her old diary. "I've seen gods walk among us," she wrote, her hands trembling. "They don't ask for temples, they ask for faith, for kindness, for love that does not need proof." As she wrote, the window rattled. A soft wind entered the room. She looked up and smiled. The faint sound of a flute echoed in the air, distant but unmistakable. She walked outside again. The sky was dark, but a small blue light shimmered by the tree, and standing there, just for a moment, was the silhouette of a boy with peacock feathers in his hair. Her lips trembled. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Krishna smiled, that same innocent, mischievous smile from her childhood. "Auntie Rosie?" His voice echoed. "You gave love even when the world gave you pain. That is what saves worlds, not miracles." And as he faded into the light, the tree released a rain of golden leaves, hundreds of them falling gently around her. One landed in her palm, and on it was written in glowing Sanskrit letters, "Prem hi param satya hai," which means love is the highest truth. Auntie Rosie closed her eyes, her tears falling freely now, not of sorrow, but peace. Days later, when villagers came to visit her, they found her sitting beneath the tree of voices, her face calm, her hands folded, holding the small flute to her heart. She had passed away smiling, but every full moon night, villagers say, the wind still carries the faint sound of a flute. And under that tree, golden light shimmers like dawn. And when people ask who Auntie Rosie was, the children whisper, she was the woman who spoke to God, and He answered.
The night had grown colder, and Auntie Mabel sat by the cracked window of her small farmhouse, the sound of thunder rolling in the distance. Her fingers traced the edge of the locket she wore, the one that once belonged to her late daughter, Lorraine. Every storm reminded her of the night she lost everything, her husband, her child, her peace. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating her face for just a second, a face carved by years of loss, love, and survival. She whispered to herself, "I thought time was supposed to heal, but it only teaches you how to hide your pain better." The phone on the table buzzed, a message from Reverend Cole. "We're still rebuilding the shelter tomorrow, Mabel. You're needed." She stared at the screen for a long moment, her reflection faint in the glass. "Needed," she muttered. It had been years since anyone used that word with her. Outside, the rain began to pour heavily, washing away the dust and the forgotten dreams of the little town. Auntie Mabel stood, wrapped her old cardigan around herself, and walked to the porch. Each raindrop felt like a memory, tapping gently on her skin, trying to wake something long buried. From the far end of the muddy path, headlights appeared. A black sedan came to a halt in front of her gate. A young woman stepped out, mid-20s, soaked, trembling, clutching a small suitcase. Her eyes met Mabel's. "Are you Auntie Mabel?" she asked, her voice shivering with fear and hope. Mabel frowned. "Who are you, child?" The girl stepped closer, tears mixing with the rain. "My name's Lily, Lorraine's daughter." The world seemed to freeze. Mabel's breath caught. "Lorraine had a child?" she whispered, disbelief and emotion crashing inside her chest. Lily nodded, her eyes pleading. "She told me, if anything ever happened, to find you." The thunder roared again as Mabel clutched the porch railing for balance. For years she had prayed for a sign that her daughter's soul was at peace, and now here stood a living echo of her bloodline, carrying all the love and unanswered questions of the past. The storm outside couldn't compare to the storm inside Mabel's heart. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Come in, child. You're home now." And as they stepped inside, lightning lit the sky again, But this time it felt less like a warning and more like a blessing.
The morning after the storm, the world outside looked washed and new. The air clean, the sun gentle. But inside Auntie Mabel's heart, everything still trembled like fragile glass. Lily sat at the wooden kitchen table, sipping warm tea from a chipped mug. Her eyes moved around the room at the old photographs, the cross above the door, the worn-out apron hanging by the stove. She told me stories about you, Lily said softly, said you were the strongest woman she ever knew. Mabel's hands froze around the teapot. She used to say that when she wanted something, she murmured with a faint, broken smile. Your mama always knew how to make me feel 10 feet tall. Lily reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather journal. She told me to keep this safe, so I'd understand when I was ready. She slid it across the table. The cover was scratched, the corners bent, but Mabel recognized it instantly. Lorraine's handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she opened the first page. The familiar cursive letters seemed to leap out at her. Mama, I'm sorry. I couldn't stay. I needed to protect her, to protect my child. Tears blurred Mabel's vision. Protect you? She whispered. Lily nodded slowly. She was scared, Auntie. There was a man. She never told me much, but she said he was dangerous. She said he was the reason she left this town. Mabel's chest tightened. Memories rushed in. Nights of shouting, of Lorraine crying, of that man, Jerome, with his temper and charm. That man destroyed her spirit, Mabel said, voice trembling. I tried to warn her, but she called me controlling. Lily leaned forward. He's the one I'm running from now. Mabel's world stopped again. The words hung heavy, sharp as the edge of a blade. You mean he's alive? Lily nodded. He found me 2 weeks ago, said I took something that belonged to him. I came here because I didn't know where else to go. Mabel rose from her chair, fire in her eyes now. He's not taking another soul from this family. Not again. Outside, a soft wind rustled the trees. The peace of the morning suddenly felt like a warning. Mabel walked to the window, her reflection hardened by years of buried strength. Your mama's gone, but I'm still here. And if he comes to our door, he'll have to face me first. Lily's lip quivered. You don't understand, Auntie. He's not the kind of man you can reason with. Mabel turned, her voice steady as stone. Child, I face death, hunger, and heartbreak. I ain't reasoning with him. I'm ending this. The silence that followed was thunderous. A storm was brewing again. Not in the sky this time, but in Mabel's soul.
The evening settled heavy over the small town, turning the trees into silhouettes and the air thick with the smell of rain-soaked earth. Auntie Mabel sat by the window, her old rocking chair creaking softly as she watched the dark clouds gather again. The house that had always felt like a sanctuary now seemed like a waiting place for truth, for danger, for reckoning. Lily sat on the couch, arms wrapped around herself, eyes darting to every small sound outside. Do you think he'll find me here? She whispered. Mabel didn't answer right away. Her gaze was fixed on the long dirt road that led up to her porch. If he does, she finally said, her voice steady, he won't leave the same way he came. The silence that followed was filled with the ticking of the old wall clock, each second dragging like a warning. Then came the knock, a slow, deliberate, heavy knock. Lily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Mabel rose, her heart pounding but her face calm. She walked to the door, her bare feet silent against the wooden floor. Who's there? She called out, though she already knew the answer. A low, familiar voice rumbled from the other side. Ain't no need to be scared, Miss Mabel. I just came for what's mine. That sound of voice cracked through her like lightning. It was Jerome, older, rougher, but unmistakable. Mabel slowly unlatched the door, but kept the chain locked. Ain't nothing here for you, Jerome. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Jerome leaned into the gap, his face half shadowed, his smile venomous. Now that ain't no way to talk to an old friend. You got something that belongs to me, that girl, and the money her mama stole. Her mama didn't steal nothing, Mabel snapped, her voice rising like thunder. She left you because you broke her soul. Jerome chuckled low. And now her little girl's trying to run too? I don't think so. She's got her mama's fire, but I know how to put that out. The sound of his words made Lily cry out from behind the couch. Mabel turned sharply. Don't you talk to her, she barked. You look at me when you speak. Jerome's eyes narrowed. You still got that mouth on you, huh, Mabel? You always thought you were better than everyone. I just learned how to live without fear, she said coldly. Jerome pushed against the door, the chain groaning under the pressure. You open this door or I'll break it. Mabel didn't flinch. You break it and I swear you won't take another breath. She reached under the small table by the wall and pulled out her late husband's old shotgun, rusty but loaded. Her hands were steady, her eyes burned with a fury she hadn't felt in years. Jerome paused. You wouldn't. Mabel met his gaze through the narrow opening. Try me. For a long moment, the world went still. Then Jerome laughed low, stepping back into the darkness. You can't keep her forever. I'll be back. Mabel shut the door and locked it tight, leaning her back against it as her chest heaved. Lily ran to her, trembling. Auntie, what are we gonna do? Mabel brushed her cheek softly. We're gonna survive, baby, just like your mama did. But this time, we ain't running. We're fighting. Outside, the wind howled through the trees like an ancient warning. Inside, Auntie Mabel's resolve turned to steel. The next morning, the sun rose pale and hesitant over the town, as if even it feared the shadow Jerome had cast. Auntie Mabel didn't sleep. She sat at her small kitchen table, tea cooling in her cup, eyes fixed on the front door. Lily hovered nearby. Quiet now, her small hands twisting the hem of her sweater. You think he's gone? Lily asked, her voice trembling. Mabel shook her head. No, baby, he's smart, and he knows what he wants, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with anymore. The phone rang, shrill and sudden. Mabel picked it up, her hand steady. Hello? A distorted voice hissed. Mabel, you can't hide forever. She's mine, and I'll take what belongs to me tonight. The line went dead. Mabel's jaw tightened. She hung up, then turned to Lily. We need a plan. We're not waiting for him to decide our fate. Hours later, she walked down the road to the small hardware store. The bell above the door jingled, and she nodded at the clerk, an old friend who knew enough about her life to respect the silence. She bought heavy-duty locks, chains, and a motion sensor alarm. Back at the house, she fortified every entry point. The sense of impending confrontation made her pulse race, yet a calm determination settled over her like a cloak. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. Night fell again, the storm rolling in behind it. Rain pelted the roof, thunder rattling the windows. Lily sat on the couch, clutching a blanket, while Mabel paced like a panther, scanning every shadow. Then she heard it, the crunch of boots on gravel, slow and deliberate. Jerome. He tried the front door, rattling the lock. Mabel waited in the shadows, her shotgun steady, her breathing slow and controlled. He cursed under his breath, reaching for the door handle again. You came back for her, Mabel said, stepping into the porch light. But this ends tonight. Jerome froze, then laughed low, venomous. You think you can stop me? I don't think. Jerome, I know, she said. He lunged, but Mabel was ready. The sound of the alarm blared, flooding the house with light. Jerome stumbled back, cursing, blinded and disoriented. Mabel advanced, her voice firm. Leave now, or I'll call the police. You don't want to see what happens next.
Lily's small voice called out. "Auntie Mabel, stay behind me," Mabel said calmly. "We're stronger than we've ever been." The storm outside seemed to mirror the tension inside. Rain hammered the porch, wind howled like a chorus of ancestors watching over Mabel's stand. Jerome hesitated, realizing he was outnumbered, not by people, but by courage, resolve, and the unshakable bond between Mabel and Lily. Slowly he backed away. "This isn't over," he hissed, disappearing into the darkness. The storm gradually faded. Inside, Mabel lowered her shotgun, relief washing over her. She turned to Lily, who was trembling but smiling through tears. "We did it," Mabel whispered. "We survived together." They sat together by the window, watching the first weak rays of sun cut through the clouds. Mabel felt a weight lift from her chest, a burden of fear, of helplessness, of waiting. She had confronted the past, protected the present, and secured the future. In the days that followed, the town learned of Jerome's arrest, his attempts to intimidate others unraveling in court. Mabel's courage had not only saved Lily, but ensured justice was served. Sitting in her favorite chair, Mabel reflected on everything she had endured. Betrayal, fear, and shadows of violence had tested her, yet love and courage had won. She smiled softly, brushing Lily's hair from her face. "You see, baby, truth and love always find their way. Justice isn't about revenge, it's about standing for what's right, even when the world trembles." Lily hugged her tightly. "I get it now, Auntie Mabel. I want to be brave like you." "You are already," Mabel whispered. "We both are." The house, once a place of fear, now echoed with laughter and warmth. Rain still tapped gently against the windows, but it was no longer threatening. It was cleansing. It was peace. And Auntie Mabel knew, deep in her heart, that they had survived the storm, stronger, unbroken, and ready for whatever life might bring next.
Morning broke softly over the small town, a golden light spilling across streets still wet from last night's storm. Auntie Mabel sat at the kitchen table, a cup of steaming tea cradled in her hands, Lily beside her, fingers laced together. For the first time in months, there was silence in the house, but it wasn't empty. It was peaceful, alive, with the promise of tomorrow. Mabel reflected on everything that had happened. Betrayal, fear, and uncertainty had tested her beyond imagination. Yet through it all, love, courage, and resilience had carried her forward. She looked at Lily, who now wore a quiet smile, a new kind of strength in her eyes. "You know, baby," Mabel said softly, "the world can be cruel. People will try to take advantage, lie, manipulate. But what we've learned is far more important than any threat we face." Lily nodded, her gaze steady. "That love and courage can protect us?" "Yes," Mabel said, a smile touching her lips, "and that truth and justice will always find a way, even if it takes patience, even if it comes after storms. We cannot control the past, but we can choose how we live today." Weeks passed. Jerome was arrested and prosecuted for his crimes, unable to threaten anyone ever again. The town, once filled with whispers and fear, now spoke Mabel's name with admiration and respect. She had not only protected her home and Lily, but had set an example of bravery and integrity for the entire community. One afternoon, Mabel and Lily went to the local park, watching children play in the spring sunlight. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Mabel thought of the past, of pain, of loss, but instead of bitterness, she felt gratitude. Every trial had strengthened her. Every betrayal had reminded her of the importance of vigilance and self-respect. "I'm proud of you, Auntie Mabel," Lily said suddenly, "not just for protecting me, but for showing me how to stand tall no matter what." Mabel's eyes glistened. "And I'm proud of you, baby. You've grown brave, kind, and strong. Never forget that strength isn't just in fighting, it's in surviving, forgiving, and loving again after everything seems lost." As they walked home, Mabel's phone buzzed. It was a message from the local Women's Support Council.
Congratulations, Mrs. Mabel Hayes. You've been nominated for the Community Courage Award. Your actions inspired hope and justice. Mabel smiled, placing a hand on her heart. Recognition was never her goal, but she felt the satisfaction of knowing her story would inspire others. The storms of her life, the betrayal, the fear, the nights of uncertainty had led her here, to peace, to hope, to a new beginning. That night, after dinner, Mabel and Lily sat on the porch, the air scented with lavender from the garden. They watched the stars emerge, tiny sparks of light in a darkened sky. Mabel whispered a prayer of thanks, not for revenge, not for punishment, but for the courage to rise, to forgive, and to love without fear. Mom, Lily said quietly, leaning against her, do you think people can really change? Mabel thought for a moment, looking up at the vast sky. Some can, baby. Some never do. But what matters is that we stay true to ourselves, protect our hearts, and never lose faith in love, justice, and the truth. That's how we shine, no matter what shadows cross our path. The night deepened, soft and calm. Inside the house, the lights glowed warmly, laughter and conversation mingling with the gentle ticking of the clock. Auntie Mabel finally felt the fullness of life she had fought so hard to reclaim, a life defined not by fear, but by courage, compassion, and the unwavering bond between her and Lily. She knew the world could still be unpredictable, that storms could return, but for now, in this quiet home, they had found peace, and in that peace, they discovered the true power of love, forgiveness, and resilience. Auntie Mabel closed her eyes, feeling the soft night wind on her face. She whispered to herself, "We survived, we endured, and we will rise again, always." Her heart was light, her spirit unbroken, and the future bright, hopeful, and filled with promise.